May I proceed?
Yes.
Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Good morning. My name is Patrick Sikorsky.
What do you do for a living?
Well, I'm the director of the Criminalistics Laboratory for the Midlands Department of Criminal Investigation. I'm also an adjunct professor at Midland State University, where I teach courses in DNA analysis.
Dr. Sikorsky, how long have you worked at the Criminalistics Laboratory?
I've been director for 5 years now, but I worked for 10 years before that in the lab as a criminalist.
Could you tell the members of the jury about your educational background?
Yes, sir. I received my bachelor's in chemistry from Marshall University. I also hold a dual PhD in biology and chemistry from Washington University in St. Louis.
Now, Dr. Sikorsky, have you been published in your field?
Yes, sir, I have in 28 peer-reviewed studies on topics that range from DNA analysis, chemical composition, analysis of trace evidence, and the presentation of evidence to non-experts.
Did you analyze any evidence for today's case?
Yes, I did. I personally analyzed the briefcase collected from Chase Covington at the time of his arrest.
Why did you analyze that briefcase?
Well, whenever people come into contact with objects such as this briefcase, they leave behind forensic evidence that I can then test to see who handled it and how they handled it.
Would you recognize that briefcase if I gave it to you?
Yes, sir, I would.
Approaching opposing counsel in Stage 3. Approaching the witness at the same.
Yes.
Here you go, Dr.
Thank you.
Dr. Sikorsky, is that the same briefcase you analyzed?
Yes, sir.
And has it been damaged in any way?
Apart from a small piece of fabric that I cut from the briefcase to do some analysis, no.
Do you have any reason to believe that the evidence you collected from that briefcase was tampered with?
No, sir, I don't.
Your Honor, at this time, State moves Stage 3 into evidence.
This time I'd like to object to lack of foundation, Your Honor.
What's the basis for the lack of foundation?
They laid no foundation as to how this witness knows that this is the actual briefcase that the witness analyzed. Because of that, they have not the proper foundation this witness has testified to and for it to be admitted into evidence.
I thought he just testified that that this is in fact the briefcase he was given. Did I mishear him?
Your Honor, they have not laid a foundation as to the process this witness went through to receive that briefcase. They have not laid a foundation as to how this witness knows that it was a briefcase that was received from Chase Covington.
Response, Your Honor?
Well, why don't we cut through it? Why don't you lay the foundation and we'll proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Sikorsky, how did you get that briefcase?
Oh, I received it from the arresting officer, Dale Williams.
And do you know whose briefcase it was?
Yes, told me that this was Commissioner Covington's briefcase collected at the time of his arrest.
Your Honor, at this time, State moves Stage 3 into evidence.
No objection this time, Your Honor.
So it's admitted without objection.
Dr. Sikorsky, you told the members of the jury that you analyzed that briefcase. What specifically did you analyze in regards to that briefcase?
Well, I analyzed the fingerprints found on the exterior of the briefcase, as well as hairs found inside the briefcase.
Now, in analyzing those things, did you employ reliable principles and methods?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did you have sufficient facts and data?
Absolutely.
And did you apply those principles and methods to the facts and data?
Yes, I did.
Dr. Sikorsky, I'd like to first talk about your fingerprint analysis. How did that begin?
As per protocol, I dusted the interior and exterior of the briefcase with magnetic powder to examine it for fingerprints.
How many fingerprints did you find?
I found 6 fingerprints.
What did you do?
Objection to lack of foundation, Your Honor, may be heard.
But the fact that he found 6 fingerprints?
No, Your Honor, as to the method that was used in discovering these fingerprints, they have not laid any foundation as to what method was used to find those fingerprints. And because of that, they have not laid the foundation to testify as to those fingerprints.
Your Honor, under Rule 705 of the Midlands Rules of Evidence, an expert witness can give his conclusions without those facts and data that he used in getting to those conclusions. If opposing counsel would like to cross-examine on those, he has every right to do so.
May I respond, Your Honor?
No, I agree. If you want to challenge this, why don't you do it without cross?
Yes, Your Honor.
So, Dr. Sikorsky, after you found those 6 fingerprints, what did you do with them?
I lifted those 6 fingerprints using tape, and I compared them against fingerprints from both criminal databases as well as fingerprints collected from Avery Bancroft and Chase Covington.
And when you compared the fingerprints you found on that briefcase to the fingerprints of the people you just mentioned, what did you find?
I found that these 6 fingerprints lifted from the briefcase belonged either to Chase Covington or Avery Bancroft.
Well, how do you determine if a fingerprint belongs to someone?
Well, first, there's this process in forensic scientists called point of comparison. It's a 16-point standard. A point of comparison, you see, is basically a distinguishing feature on a fingerprint, such as a delta or a whorl. An expert such as myself then takes those features and looks for 16 points of comparison that are the same between a known print and a sample print. At that point, I can reliably conclude that those 2 prints came from the same exact person.
Dr. Sikorsky, did every one of those 6 fingerprints meet that 16-point standard?
Yes, sir, they did.
Now, you mentioned that those fingerprints belonged to the defendant and Avery Bancroft. How many fingerprints were Chase Covington's?
2 of the fingerprints I lifted were from Chase Covington.
And where were they?
They were both on the handle.
And the rest of those 4 fingerprints, the ones that belonged to Avery Bancroft, where were they?
The remaining 4 prints belonged to Avery Bancroft, 2 of which were on the lid, the third one which was on the right side latch, and the last one which was also on the handle of the briefcase.
Dr. Sikorsky, you also mentioned you analyzed some hair. Where'd you find this hair?
I found 5 hairs in the bottom right corner of the briefcase.
And how did you analyze these hairs?
Well, first, I used a process called light microscopy analysis, merely to determine whether these hairs are human or not, so that I'm not testing animal hairs in later stages of testing.
Were they in fact human hairs?
Yes, sir, all 5 hairs were human.
And after you determined that these were human hairs, what did you do next?
Well, the next stage in this process would have been DNA analysis.
What's DNA analysis?
DNA, which stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, is a genetic blueprint for all living organisms and is unique to each human individual. In this case, I extracted DNA from the hairs collected from the briefcase to create a DNA profile that I could then compare against DNA profiles from other relevant subjects.
And who were these relevant subjects?
I personally tested DNA from Tracy Minettos, Chase Covington, and Avery Bancroft.
Who's Tracy Minettos?
Tracy Minettos, as she indicated to me at the time of collection, is Chase Covington's non-biologically related step-sibling.
Well, Dr. Sikorsky, when you analyzed the DNA that was found in the hairs in the briefcase to the DNA of the people you just mentioned, what did you find?
I found that Avery Bancroft's DNA was the only match to the DNA profiles of all the hair samples that I collected from the briefcase.
Objection to lack of foundation, having occurred. May I refer you to bottom of page 5 of your case law packet to Carriers Association of Midland versus Merrill Dow.
Hang on, let me catch up with you.
Yes, ma'am.
Which case?
It would be Carriers Association of Midland versus Merrill Dow, bottom of page 5.
Okay.
This case law states that for an expert to testify to the methods that they use, to the conclusions, they must first state whether that method has been peer reviewed and whether it's been tested. They have not done either of those, and because of that, they've not done the proper foundation for testing about the conclusions of those methods.
Okay, so you need to lay the foundation. If you want him to testify as to his conclusion, you need to lay the foundation for the tests that he ran in accordance with the requirements of the federal rule for a DNA analysis.
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Sikorsky, did those tests you conducted for your hair analysis, were they reliable?
Yes, sir, they are. They're relied upon dozens, hundreds, thousands of science labs across the country.
Have they been peer reviewed?
Yes, sir, they have.
Now, Dr. Sikorsky, back to your hair analysis. When you compared the hair found in the DNA in the briefcase, what did you find when you compared it to the DNA of relevant suspects?
I found that the DNA from Avery Bancroft was the only match to the DNA from the 5 hair samples that I collected.
Now, Dr. Sikorsky, after analyzing all the forensic evidence you were provided with in today's case, were you able to come to a conclusion about whether or not someone other than the defendant handled that briefcase before it was confiscated?
Yes, sir, I was. I was able to conclude that it was Avery Bancroft who handled this briefcase prior to Chase Covington.
Your Honor, I have nothing further. approaching the witness and replaying the brief.
You may proceed on cross.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Sikorsky.
Good morning.
You're brought on to analyze a briefcase found in the possession of Chase Covington.
That's correct.
You did a few tests on that briefcase that you mentioned, didn't you?
Yes, sir, I did.
I'd like to begin with the fingerprint analysis test you did. You used an ACE-B procedure for this test,
That's correct.
and you found 6 fingerprints in total.
That's correct.
And 2 of those were from Chase Covington,
Yes, sir, 2 of them were.
and those were found on the handle, correct?
That's correct.
And there's a latch on that briefcase, isn't there?
Yes, sir, there are 2 latches on the briefcase.
And those latches are used to unlock the briefcase.
That's correct.
You did not find any fingerprints on the latch from Chase Covington,
That's correct.
meaning that there's absolutely no evidence that Chase Covington opened that briefcase.
Well, there were smudged and damaged fingerprints, but I, in good conscience, can't test for smudged or damaged fingerprints on those latches.
Back to my question, you cannot say that Chase Covington opened that briefcase.
It's possible that he never did.
And now, I'd like to bring you to what that test cannot tell you. It cannot tell you when those fingerprints were put on that briefcase.
No, it can't.
It could have been several days prior to Chase Covington touching it.
That's possible, but fingerprints do have a lifespan.
It could have been several months.
Yeah, possibly.
It could have been a year,
Probably not, no, not in my expertise.
but it could have been a year.
Very, very unlikely.
And it also can't tell you how those fingerprints were put on that briefcase,
No, my tests don't allow me to say that.
meaning that Chase Covington could have accidentally picked up that briefcase and grabbed that handle, and it would have shown the same results.
That's possible, but I'd be speculating at that point.
So all this test can tell you is that at some point, Chase Covington grabbed the handle of that briefcase.
That's correct.
I'd like to bring you to the second test you conducted, and that was on the hair follicles found in the briefcase.
That's correct.
And you used DNA mitochondrial analysis on this, correct?
That's correct.
And you found 5 hairs in that briefcase,
Yes, sir, I did.
and they belong to Avery Bancroft.
Yes, sir, they did.
Be clear, you did not find any hairs from Chase Covington.
No, sir, I did not.
And once again, this test cannot tell you when those hairs got in that briefcase,
No, sir, same as fingerprints.
and it can't tell you how they got in that briefcase, can it?
No, they can't.
Now, I'd like to bring you to what this test cannot tell you. And it can't tell you what was inside that briefcase when you received it.
No, testing for hairs wouldn't tell me what was in the briefcase.
And the fingerprint analysis test cannot tell you that either.
No, sir, it can't.
When you received that briefcase, there was nothing inside it besides those hair follicles,
That we tested for, yes.
meaning that there could have been anything inside that briefcase prior to receiving it.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Can I find out? I'm asking this witness if it's possible that there was something inside that briefcase before he received it, and it is very relevant to this witness's testimony, meaning that it is not speculation, because the witness can simply say no or yes, it is possible if they know.
As I understand it, the briefcase was empty when he received it, other than those hairs, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Well, then let's move on.
Yes, Your Honor. All your tests can tell you is that at some point, Avery Bancroft and Chase Covington had a briefcase in their possession.
That's absolutely correct.
No further questions.
Anything on redirect?
No, Your Honor, may Dr. Sikorsky be excused.
Yes.
And with that, Your Honor,